This is the Hidden Killers podcast with Tony Bruschi.
Featuring defense attorney, Hidden Killers daily contributor, and host of the Defense Diaries podcast, Bob Motta.
Like there was a thing where, like, kind of one of the bigger points is, and I know you haven't followed this case as closely as I have, but, you know, when she was sealing everything, like all this stuff, including pleadings, all kinds of stuff, they did a doc drop like on June 23rd of like 118 documents that she had previously had sealed or listed as confidential for, you know, since October, since he was arrested, Richard Allen was arrested. And then when she puts him on the docket, she doesn't really put him on the docket. She says she makes them accessible to the public, and they create some website that's really difficult to use. And, you know, you really have to like figure it out. It's not like where I can go onto the docket for, you know, the Indiana court system and typically type in the case number or the defendant's name. It'll pull up the entire docket. It'll show me when things are filed. It'll name what the document is. And, you know, I go from there. With these 118 documents, what the petitioner is complaining of is that, number one, they were all stamped as being filed on the same date of June 23rd. And the reason that matters is because the docket is all that the appellate court has to go by. Mm-hmm. So if Richard Allen is to be convicted and he wants to at some point appeal his conviction, the appellate court is going to be relying exclusively on the record, on the docket, on the court records. And when they get this mess coming from her, they can't make heads from tails, you know? So it's a real problem, like in many different ways. It's not just like big deal. So she didn't have things where people could see him. Well, it's a big deal because when she drops these 118 documents and all puts them as being filed on the same day, it has a huge effect in terms of when things were filed in the case, and for them to get a clear record of what happened in the case. I mean, the appellate court, they're not playing around. Like, you know, you're dealing with very specific issues. And again, their entire analysis is based on the record of the trial court. So when you have that going on, it makes it near impossible for them to be able to do their jobs effectively, which ultimately affects Richard Allen's rights.
Sure.
Defendant. So fast forward to Monday. So you've got Baldwin and Rosie who have been tossed from the case. You've got these two Allen County, her hometown attorneys that she's appointed. And you're wondering, well, are Rosie and Baldwin, are they going to continue to fight? You know, what can they do next? What can they do to try to get back on if they want to? Because remember, they had filed their own pro bono private appearances on his behalf,
yes,
which changes the Sixth Amendment analysis in terms of right to counsel, because, you know, typically it's thought in many of the districts that people that are appointed, indigent people that are appointed attorneys or public defenders, that they don't get any choice in that matter. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't get to pick and choose. No, I don't like this lawyer. Give me another one. It's like whoever you get appointed as your lawyer. You know, the question then became, because these guys worked on the case for 11 months, worked very hard on the case for 11 months, created a attorney-client relationship with their client. He wants them as his lawyers unequivocally, you know, and is stated as such in a written letter to the judge. And, you know, she still removed him, you know, and like, you just have to try to think of that in a situation. Like, imagine that you've been arrested for a crime and you've been appointed a couple of lawyers, and these guys, you know, work on your case for months and months and months. And, you know, you think they're doing a great job for you and you're optimistic, especially like, imagine if you're innocent.
Sure.
You know, and you've got these two guys that are fighting like hell, you know, to try to make sure that they're not going to have an innocent man go to prison. And then all of a sudden they're stripped away from you. Now they're stripped away because there were a couple of leaks. Like, so I was sitting in the courtroom on the 19th before the 31st. The 31st was a circus, but the 19th, which I think we talked about it a little. I don't know how many details we got into it though.
Yeah.
Because it's a fascinating and really screwy set of circumstances, but they're all back in chambers. And a lot of it came out after the fact, probably after we ended up talking. And essentially what the defense is alleging is that she ambushed them, that there was no notice that they were going to have the hearing. They show up. She gives them what I call a Hobson's choice, which is really no choice at all.
Yeah.
And she says, look, I'm either going to fleece you publicly, and I've granted cameras to be in the courtroom for this one hearing. She paraded 9 cops in, or the state did. And she says, I got witnesses out there. They've done an investigation. So I can either do that, which potentially has ramifications for them with the bar, with the Indiana State Bar. It could create a real issue for them. The complaint, more likely than not, would occur, and it could result in them being suspended, or I don't think it would rise to the level of being disbarred. But, so she says, or you can withdraw. So Baldwin makes an oral motion to withdraw. Rosie says, you know what? I'm going to put it in writing. And so in the interim, he turns around over the weekend, and like midweek the following week, he files a couple of things. One, a verified declaration that he is still counsel for Richard Allen, and 2, a motion to disqualify Judge Gull from the case. And then, he makes his arguments. And so then you fast forward to the 31st, she's got her 2 appointees, the new guys standing in there. You got Rosie and Baldwin in there. It's super awkward for all of them. No one knows what's going on. No one knows what she's going to do. So she basically ignores these Baldwin and Rosie initially and says, oh, Mr. Libredo, I see that you've entered or filed a motion to continue the trial. And Libredo says, yes, Your Honor, that's correct. We just came out of the case. We need time to be able to catch up and familiarize ourselves with the evidence. And from that point forward, then she goes to Rosie. Rosie gives his speech, and then she basically looks at Allen and again says, I'm sorry, sir. I know that's what your desire is, but I can't do it. I can't let these men represent you. And then another attorney who was representing Baldwin steps into the well of the courtroom, and he wants to make a record of it, of exactly what went down from his client's perspective back in chambers. And, they're saying that they were coerced into withdrawing, blah, 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 blah. And he makes a real solid record, as to what the defense's theory is. So again, fast forward to this Monday, and another writ is filed by a woman named Karen Weinecke and another gentleman named Mark Lehman, who are both Indiana attorneys. And this particular petition for a writ of mandamus, which again is an extraordinary remedy, and they're asking for the higher court to either do something or not do something. And in this case, they're asking them to, number one, stay everything that's going on in the trial court, which means put it on pause. Don't let anything happen while we're getting this all worked out and resolved. 2, that they reinstate Richard Allen as appointed counsel. Okay. Which means that they would still get paid by the county. And 3, that they remove Judge Gull from the case. So whether or not it's going to succeed is hard to say. They make a really strong argument, but, it's a big move for the Supreme Court to do it. To take her off the case is a big move. To put them back on is a big move, because if they put Rosie and Baldwin back on, they're basically telling the judge that you screwed up.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal. Like, they're not chomping at the bit to do that as a general proposition, but I mean, in my estimation, it's called for. In my estimation, this case has gone off the rails. And when the only thing that really matters at the end of the day is trying to get justice for Abby and Libby, and that is intertwined with making sure that Richard Allen gets a fair trial, And then he's represented by the counsel of his choice that are going to put forth a zealous defense so that if he's found guilty, we can feel secure in the fact that he had the guys that he wanted, who we know worked the case as hard as they could. And the state had enough evidence to prove that he was guilty.
Want to listen ad-free? Want advanced access to all of our interviews before anyone else?
Become a True Crime Today Premium Plus subscriber on Apple Podcasts.
You get every episode commercial-free.
So you can binge on true crime
Until you can binge no more.
Search True Crime Today Premium Plus on Apple Podcasts now, or go to our podcast page and sign up now.
More of the Hidden Killers podcast next.